Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a special kind of question. A question that gets people focused on the outcome that they want and the time frame and the steps to reach that outcome. I've got an author who was a sales rep. I love talking to reps who turn into authors, people who are so passionate about how they sell that they're willing to document it and share it with other people. Too many great salespeople are what we call unconsciously competent. They're good, but they can't describe why they're good. They give bland goodness of, I work hard, or relationships, or value. But that doesn't give us much to work with. What we need is exact examples, case studies, precision, so that we can apply it to what we do. Now, I am a huge fan of questions. Questions are our only mind control tool. I did a course on questions that covers the whole gamut from unaware to commitment. And these questions are really focused on, once you have interest, how do you connect the person to what you are selling and what they want to get out of it, and then come up with some urgency based off of the outcome and the time frame of that. We're going to be giving quite a few examples. I've read Kimberly's book. I like it. I'm applying it. I think everyone can get some value out of this immediately. So I'd pay attention to maybe play this a couple times. And I'll sum it up at the end. And for the people already in the course, I'll give you an update on the course. Before we dive in, just make sure you're checking out my buddies over at Co-Video. Video emails are crushing it. It's the way to break through today, to connect up a face and a personality and not just what you do and how you do it. This is the problem we're talking about today. Everybody is talking about who we are, what we do, what you get out of it. And then the client has to match that to what they're doing and what they need. And our clients are pushing us to who you are, what you do, and how much does it cost. But that doesn't connect us. It doesn't put us in the world that we need to be and the outcome that we're going to get. And I think video is one of those ways. Also, Pipedrive is just cooking. You got to check out Pipedrive. I've been working with them and their content team. They got an objection handling tool that I participated with. And they've got not only great content, they've got a great product. And it's really evolving fast. It runs on all your platforms. Whether you have a corporate CRM or not, you need your own. You need something to keep track of things, to keep all the contact info clean, to understand and keep you focused. So check it out. You get 60 days free with the Brutal Truth coupon. Let's get into the interview. Hey, Kim, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in the IT business since the beginning of my career, and I've always been in sales-related roles or sales leadership roles. And about a year ago, I decided it's time to start putting that experience down on paper. So right now I've written 2 books. By the end of July, I should have 8 out.
8 books? 2 to 8?
Yes.
That's quite prolific. What made you decide to write a book?
Well, the original book wasn't intended to be a book. It was going to be a resume on steroids. So instead of claiming I could do things, I wanted to actually get into detail on how I did it to kind of prove my points, that I can actually do what I'm saying. And when I started circulating the draft to get people's feedback, I started getting hired to come and help major corporations like Fortune 50 companies to do what I describe in the book. And then I kind of refocused it from a resume to a book, which didn't take very long, and it became a bestseller. It's been in the top 10% ever since its release on February 1st.
And what does it cover that the other 5 million sales books don't cover?
You know what? That is the best question I have ever had anyone ask me. And I'm so grateful you asked that, because the thing that I noticed, and if you saw my library, it is full of whatever the hot new thing was, from the Challenger Cell to Sandler to anything that was out there, I have in my library. But as a reader, I would read it and go, okay, now how am I going to apply this? This all is awesome information. I agree with everything I'm reading, but how do I execute it? And so actual execution is what's been missing for me. I've had to translate. And one of the things about my books is I talk about that problem. We do this to our to our customers too, when we're presenting, we expect them to translate why our features and functions are going to rock their world or change their life. And the premise of my books is we need to do that translation for them. And the whole book is how to, I've taken some of the top selling books and given exact examples of how to go and execute the principles.
Because even then, it's not just execution, it's how well you execute it, isn't it?
That is correct. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that when you change the way you say things, it has a profound effect on people's chemistry in their brain, and their response is phenomenal. Yeah. So far, every single reader has told me this has changed their life.
And what do they get out of it when they say change their lives? Are they just looking at sales from a new angle now?
No, it's how you say things. So if I were to say, Brian, I do these things, I can do this for you, your brain chemistry is completely different than if I say, Brian, I'm going to make a statement and I want you to tell me, can you say this today? Do you wish you could say this today? Or you don't know, it's not important, not applicable. And if you can do it today, score yourself 1 to 5. 1 meaning you got a lot of work to do, 5 meaning you've nailed it. What happens is now your whole brain is hijacked. And you are focused on what I'm about to say because you have to respond. Yeah. And so if I say, I saved $1 million my first month with the principles in Visnostic selling, your eyes will dart up to the left or to the right, but they'll dart around as you're trying to visualize the way your life is today, and you'll start visualizing your life how it could be. Your brain chemistry is off the charts receptive. So instant rapport is established, but it kind of works like Pavlov's dog. When somebody communicates like this with you, your brain chemistry is almost like a serotonin rush, and you relate this person to positive feelings that you're having. And before you know it, that person in your audience is actually asking you to buy.
And is it just asking better questions, or is it just guiding people through the internal decision process that they're going to have to make?
Another wonderful question. So one of the principles I teach in the book is how to word your sentences. And in today's world, you have, Generation Z just graduated. It's the very first class that's hitting the workforce. Our generation, or my generation, I shouldn't assume you're my age, Brian. My generation had a 12-second attention span. The millennials were down to 8 seconds. The Gen Z has 3 seconds. That means your first 3 words in everything you say, if you want to hook them and get their attention, better be meaningful. So we have a tendency, because it's the way we've been conditioned, it's the way everything is marketed around us, to say what we do and then kind of as a sidebar, oh, and by the way, this will be your results. We can't do that anymore. We have to start with results, add a timeline, and then talk about the how. And this goes back to Simon Sinek's start with why. The why is the results.
Okay, so start with that, but because you sold complex things. I was looking through your profile, and what you have to do is get to the problem that they have, or the problem that you solve, get them thinking about that versus just what you do.
You do, but the problem is, and you'd think we rehearsed this. I've never talked to you before, and you're doing so well on these questions. The problem is we tend to start out with the how we do things and then get to that later on. And the problem is the audience never gets engaged emotionally or mentally. Right. So if I were to say, instead of talking about the complexities and the problems that I fix, I talk about the results. So instead of the problem, which actually releases different chemicals in your brain, I talk about the incredible results, which is a positive thing.
But in a lot of cases, the results are, either too far off or not connected to the product, not believable, not comprehensible. Isn't that true? Or
that's true. And here's what's cool about Visnostic statements. You're not making a claim. What you're trying to do is qualify in a very unique way what's important to your client. So if I were to say, I can save you $1 million, you kind of roll your eyes and you're like, whatever,
Yeah.
But if I were to say, I'm going to make a statement as though you're making the statement and you tell me if it's important or if you can already say this today, then I go into, I can save $1 million in a month with this vendor. Can you say that today? Do you wish you could say that today? Not important, not applicable. The timeline part, which is the second component of the statement, is just as important as the result, because saving $1 million in 10 years is very different than saving $1 million in a month.
Yeah, it brings it back. It's something tangible.
Correct.
Now, is this something that you discovered or developed in your selling, or is it something that you studied in a different field and applied it to selling?
No, what happened, and this was about 15 years ago, I was doing a present. I had the most perfect thing to sell. It was like selling $10 bills for $1. Everyone wanted it. Everyone needed it. The return on investment was huge. It was fast. It was like the perfect dream sales job. I jumped out of bed every morning. I couldn't wait to go help people and change their life. And I had this one client I had been working with for a while. I did this presentation. He fell asleep during the presentation. And he was mortified when I tapped him on the shoulder, and he was apologetic, said it was a rough night, come back and let's do it again. So I came back again, and this time he was taking really vigorous notes, and I went over to see what he was really into, and he was doing his grocery list. So he wasn't engaged that time either. Yeah. And I was like, why isn't it working with him? And, I don't think I'm this brilliant person. So I tell people all the time, this had to have been divine intervention, because I don't know how I came up with it, but I really dissected our presentation and I realized we had a lot of the same words: innovative, groundbreaking, easy to use, all these things that were buzzwords that everyone was using. And I realized he doesn't know what I'm selling. I'm using all these marketing buzzwords and he has no idea what the true benefit is. And so I started dissecting and looking for results. And that's when things really changed. I asked him to go to lunch. I said, I'm not going to present to you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I want your advice. And I did this approach with him. He pushed his food aside and he goes, I am assuming you can do these things or we wouldn't be going through these statements. And I said, yes, that's true. And he goes, why didn't you tell me this? I go, this is the presentation I've given you twice. And he said, and none of it sounded familiar. And that's because I pulled out all the results. And that's what I was leading with was, this is what you're going to get out of what I'm trying to tell you we do.
And half the problem is clients, because they want to just know who we are, what do we do, and how much does it cost, which
that's what we think, and that's what we've been taught. But I can tell you I've sold over $2 billion worth of things in my career, and not one person bought because my company was publicly traded or because I've been in business for 10 or more years, or that I had 300,000 clients. That might be why I get the meeting, but that's not why they buy.
No, I didn't say why they buy. I said what they push us towards. They don't ask us, what outcome can we get from this? Because they're not thinking outcome.
And that's right, because they're also conditioned that things are supposed to be done a certain way. So when you take this approach, you're guiding them through the process. And, back in solution selling days, we had to qualify the customer and say, what's important to you, Mr. Customer? and we care about you and we want to hear you talk. But the problem is, what if they forgot something? What if something's on their mind today, but they completely tomorrow something else becomes a priority. So taking them through this thought process actually guides them. I have gone back to customers once I've developed the Visgnostic statements and gone over it with them to see, which ones resonate with you, and found out that there were things we did they didn't know we did. And I was able to sell a customer I wasn't planning to even sell to. I was truly trying to get feedback.
So you start with the outcome that they want or should want. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay. And then you work questions in based off of timelines to get their attachment to what you're talking about. Am I following you?
Ideally, those are the strongest Visgnostic statements. Okay. Correct. But not all Visgnostic statements have to have a result and a timeline. Sometimes it's an outcome. Like, here's an example of one that really blew my mind. I had 30 solid Visnostic statements, but this one said something about, I have never had an employee taken from a job site due to lack of certification. You know, like the certifications expire, and sometimes construction sites, they get audited. And if somebody's certification expired the day before, the whole day can be shut down because they had an unauthorized person working. So that's a pain point for people, even though the result isn't monetary and there's no timeline in that statement. Yeah. That statement alone made such a huge impact on people that I talked to.
Okay. And how long does it take you to sit down with a client and go through this? I mean, because you have to really find out what the client deeply cares about, not what the salesperson deeply cares about.
So when you create your Visnostic statements, you run them by your existing clients first.
Yeah,
and the existing clients will give you an idea of what's really resonating, which ones made the biggest impact. And then I try and prioritize them that way. But that's the whole point of the process, is you're trying to find out what's important to one client might not be important to another.
Yeah. And these are most powerful during that kind of initial meeting, face-to-face, or where they're already semi-qualified? They've at least committed to, a half hour?
So when I started this, I really emphasized the fact that getting in front of people is so important, because you can't see their body language. You can't see if they're doing their email while you're talking to them. But I've been working with a lot of inside sales teams. One of the biggest ones in Chicago has 6,000 inside sales team, and the majority of their business is done on the phone. It's made an unbelievable change in the relationships on the phone. So even though the clients couldn't see them, I mean, you can do a Zoom call or a WebEx and do a video conference. But if you're just doing voice, this approach still triggers the same chemistry. It's just that the salesperson or the person conducting the Visnostic interview is handicapped because they're not being able to see their audience.
Now, you've mentioned chemicals a couple times. So what's the science behind this, or is there?
So that's what's really cool. About a year ago, I started meeting with neuroscientists. Well, let me back up even further. What really triggered where I realized this was not just dumb luck on my part or something weird that I was doing that was unique for me only, that, maybe it wouldn't work as well on with a man. I read Mike Bosworth's latest book is called What Great Salespeople Do. And he talks about storytelling and how it affects the chemistry in the brain. And as I actually was listening to an audiobook while I was driving from Austin to Dallas. So it was a 3-hour drive. And I was just so frustrated I couldn't highlight or take notes, because so much of what he was saying was applicable to what I was doing with my clients with this approach. Now I understood the science behind it. So when I, at the point when I realized this wasn't going to be a resume, it was going to be a book, I started interviewing multiple neuroscientists, and they were saying things to me like I couldn't even understand them. It was like they were talking in a different language.
They were like PhDs or something.
Oh, for sure they were. 100% they were all doctors.
Yeah.
But they would say things like, oh my gosh, you have taken something so complex as the metacognitive reaction and the stimuli in the, cortex, and you've turned it into something that everyone can understand. I was like, well, I didn't understand anything you just said, but okay, cool. And the first foreword was actually written by one of the top neuroscientists in the world, but no one understood what he was saying. So Michael Bosworth, the gentleman that wrote What Great Salespeople Do and who inspired this whole neuroscience understanding, has written the foreword to my books.
So, storytelling, because that's it. I mean, that's what a lot of people are referencing, but it's a skill, and very few salespeople are investing the time in that. And every time there's more of a scientific versus a silver bullet approach to selling, reps get overwhelmed. They're like, and I think the reason why Challenger was successful was it had a great title and you get to push back. and who doesn't want to be a challenger, but nobody really does it. How do you break this down so that mere mortals can do it?
Wow. Have you read my book? Because you seem like you've read my book.
I've been selling longer than you even, and I've always looked, because I had more of a technical background, so I always looked for, something that was more than smile and hard work, because that, you can do that the first year, you don't get the results, you start looking for something better.
Well, you're the best interviewer I've ever talked to because you're asking all the right questions. So when you ask marketing, what tools do you give to sales? They're like brochures, website, literature,
content.
Right. And when you ask a sales leader, what's the hardest thing about managing a sales organization? Incompetence, lack of product knowledge, caller reluctance, fear. These are things. So what I do is I workshop where I bring marketing and sales in together. And once you have your visnostic statements, then I work with a post-sales team to develop statement of works. Like, how are we going to take something that's been identified as a non-strength with a client and turn it into a strength? And all of this is put into a spreadsheet that I've paid money to have pretty advanced algorithms put into it. So once you have the visnostic statements and you're talking to a client, you can have this on a tablet or laptop, your phone, and then you just ask these questions and you either put a check mark or you put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anything that's not a 5 is an opportunity for improvement. Because yes, I can do it today and I give myself a 5, a perfect score. There's no room for improvement. But if I give a 4, there's still an opportunity there. And so the spreadsheet automatically generates dashboards that say, here's the areas you're strong. Congratulations. Very good job. Here's the areas, the next level that could be strengths. And here is exactly how we are going to help you turn those into strengths. And here's your least, I don't like to say weakness, so I always say non-strengths. So these are the ones that are your biggest opportunities for improvements. And here's how we will help you. So you can give this tool to a brand new salesperson, teach them how to use it. It's very easy. The next day they can be interacting with clients or potential clients and have that confidence because the answers will automatically be generated. And then that objective is for the client to say, I want to learn more. And that's when you know exactly what team members you'll bring in for the next meeting.
So that is the objective, is to take kind of curiosity, build it into interest, and then to have a commitment to a next step. Is that the stage that this is the most effective at?
Oh, absolutely. And if you it sounds like you're familiar with Challenger Sell. One of the things I love that Matt Dixon talks about is that getting that second meeting is where most salespeople mess up, because in solution selling, you're telling them all the things you know about them and impressing them with how much you care about them. And their heads are bopping up and down, and that's great. But when you left that meeting, you added no value. You didn't tell them anything that they didn't already know. So why would they bring you back and waste their time? And that's what this whole visnostic approach does, is to establish that rapport and that credibility instantly that you are bringing value and challenging them to do something different.
Well, yeah, I mean, because a lot of these elements of sales, I think people need to understand that they fit into the game, that they are skills, but they're not the whole game. That's the only issue I really have with the Challenger. It's just one skill. And I think it was overblown and presented by somebody who has never sold, or two people who have never sold.
That is funny that you say that, because I talk about that in my book, that I can tell when I'm reading a book if someone's been a salesperson or not.
Sure.
But there's a lot of really good speakers out there that are making a lot of money that have never sold.
Right. Yeah, and they slap on their anecdotal experience and call it research, and all of a sudden they have some credibility because they can wave their hands, and they're very entertaining. But any sport requires you to have tons of skills, because even with this, you say you get the next meeting. That's great. That's what you want, but you still don't have an order. And that doesn't diminish the value of it. It just puts everything in perspective that when we get that golden opportunity to have a direct bi-directional conversation with a client, and we are conditioned to talk about who we are, what we do, and what you get out of it or what it costs. And the other person just pushes you in there. And how do you compare against anybody else? And what do you do that you're not connecting? And that's what I like about what you're doing.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more on that. You're dead on. And what you just described on those books is exactly what I talked about at the beginning of this podcast, is the thing that's lacking in most books today is how do I go execute it? Yeah. And this book is attempting to translate solution selling, Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and the Challenger Sell on how you can go and execute.
Yeah, because I think the execution part is the critical part, because I use the analogy of comedy, because there's for every comedian, there's probably 10,000 comic writers in Hollywood.
Wow.
Easily, right? I mean, how many comedians can you name that make a living off of comedy?
That is a great analogy. I'm going to use that, Brian. That's a really good one.
Right. And because I love comedy, and I listen to all these podcasts, and they're comedy writers, and they're funny, but they're not nearly as funny as the people they write for.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, they are writing the words, but someone else is performing the words. They don't change the words. They just perform.
You're right.
Yeah. And, the same thing with like cooking. Every great chef puts out a cookbook. And you're like, that's the stupidest thing they could ever do, right? No, because they know that executing that recipe is what they do. And everyone can buy the ingredients, follow the recipe, and it never comes out the same. It will in 10 years after you do it 1,000 times. But I think that's an element of sales that we should own it. We have to own it, because if we don't, we're going to blame the recipe instead of the chef.
Well said.
Yeah. And that's a distinction that no matter how great a book can be, because you're sharing your experience, which is gold, and very few salespeople do it. 99% of the books are written by people with less than 5 years of sales experience, if any. And nothing that they write is wrong or not good. It's just either incomplete or myopic or what I call bland goodness. Oh, it's good, but, I'm not sure what I'm going to get out of it. But I like these structures. Where'd you come up with the name?
Oh, that's also a good question. I had this book finished and ready to go at Christmas, but I was so perplexed by the title. The original title was The Power of Visualization Diagnostic Statements, a Neuroscientific Approach to Selling and Marketing.
You got it down to that.
Huh? My son's a millennial, and he goes, why not just say Visnostics? And I was like, visualization, diagnostics, I liked it a lot. It just kind of rolled off my tongue. So Visnostic Selling was the name of the very first book. And now I'm doing special editions because the book is very interactive. And the funnest part for me is all of the discussions I've had with the readers and the feedback. And they get excited about success stories, and they've been sharing them.
So they use this instead of let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of taking someone to the house and then letting them walk through and them just watch. And, using this approach, you can actually take people to the right house and they'll buy the first house they see. If you pull the visualizations out of them up front, it saves everyone. Shoot, if I sold a house, I'd rather have one person walk through my house than a bunch of strangers. So I'm going to want to list my house with that kind of agent, for example.
Well, and I think real estate's the perfect thing for that, because, I look at my house and there's like probably 3 to 5 unique things that unless you point them out, no one's going to notice it. And if you do notice it, the likelihood that they'll connect with it and view the property as unique, I think is insanely valuable. Have you ever studied neurolinguistics programming?
No, teach me.
Well, it's basically the sensory-based conversations. It came out of hypnosis, and like your questions about, because we represent the world or receive it in our 5 senses. So if you speak to those five senses and you find out whichever one's dominant, your ability to engage and speak the same language at them is very much more likely. Like when you talked about the eye movements and that's all in there. And I spent a lot of time with it when I first got into sales, but it's a big thing to chew. Especially when you're in front of somebody to try.
Maybe there's a cool co-written book there in our future, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't dare try and get reps to embrace it. I mean, even having reps prepare their questions before a call is a stretch sometimes. And I get it because, once you're in the game, all this, you go back to your, unconscious competence. You don't start pulling out new things. Like the 9-quadrant solution selling. I remember a manager pulled that out in a first sales call, and the client looked at me and rolled their eyes. It was like, that's not organic, natural conversation. And I think, like with what you're doing, once you teach it, once you get it ingrained, because, when you're face to face, you can't pull it out. You have to kind of make it part of your personality.
It does, and it changes your thought process. Once you start getting conditioned to writing, after you've written about 10 Visnostic statements, your whole thought process changes. You start really looking for the right way to articulate messages. And I worked with a company, it was before the book was even out, and I had their best person, which was an executive, give a presentation, and then I transcribed that presentation and categorized it into what I call vendor speak versus client speak.
Yeah.
It was 28 pages of transcript. Half a page was about the client.
Yeah.
It's
that's the natural trap. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But when people see that in writing, and it's enlightening to them, and they become a lot more sensitive to what they're doing wrong and what they could do better.
Cool. And what's the best format for people to consume the book? Kindle, hardback, Audible?
It's, I don't do Audible because the whole book the premise is on visualization. There's 70 original art in the book. It's all written in cartoon. The drawings are in cartoon, which is also a stimulant. Everything's been done from a neurological perspective based on the advice I've gotten from neuroscientists. For example, a photograph does not affect your brain like a cartoon drawing does. So having an audio version of this book would not be as effective. So I'm not doing that. Right now, Visnostic Selling is out in 42,000 bookstores worldwide. Amazon seems to be where everyone likes to go, but if you can go to a mom and pop bookstore and they can have it for you the next day anywhere in the world. And then I'm playing around with Kindle. I've never done Kindle before. And by the way, I used a publisher the first go around. The Kindle I did myself, and I like that freedom so much more. But I'm experimenting with the Kindle version on the Realtor. If that goes well, then the next book, which will be Visnostic Marketing, is going to be on paperback and Kindle.
Excellent. And where can people go to get in touch with you?
Oh gosh, in my book I have multiple email addresses, but I set up one special for podcasts. So if you want to put podcast@dynaexec.com, I'd love that way, Brian. I can give you feedback and say, hey, these people came and listened to your show and they reached out to me. So podcast@dynaexec.com. DynaExec stands for Dynamic Executives. It's DYNAEXEC.
See, this is the problem that we're all running into, is that when we stay at that level of a product, a service, what does it do? What do you get out of it? How much does it cost? You don't connect with people. You have to get them to visualize it, to connect with it emotionally, to see themselves using it, to getting the benefit out of it. I think these questions are very powerful, and you can apply them pretty quickly. It doesn't take long to develop them. For anybody who's already signed up for either of the courses, my questions course is included. Just check out the office hours for the coupon code, and it includes 2 one-on-ones to kind of model your questions and then to polish them up. I'm going to include this type of question in there because I think it fits into that interest stage and to get people to take action. Now, if you don't have this type of structure, you're going to get stuck talking about what you do, how you're different, and then you're at a thing. You're a commodity. You're not I hate to use the word solution because everybody uses it. It's so overused, like value, that nobody knows what it means. But you have to have people see themselves using the product. Imagine you're buying a house or a car. There's that moment where what they call transfer of ownership, not the legal sense, but the emotional sense, where people start to see themselves driving the car, see themselves living in the house. There's an element where they connect to it. And until you get there, you don't really have a sale. You only have interest. And at these stages that people go through, that if you have to understand where you are. What we all do is we think, if we have just the most enticing, compelling value proposition, people are going to switch. Or we come up with, selling from where they are to where they want to be. It's more than just a conversation. You have to really dig in and connect with people. But you can't start there. You have to build to there and build from there. Too many people are talking about a skill as the whole game. This is a skill. It's a great one. It's powerful, but you got to play the whole game. Now, let me ask you a question. Are you open to becoming the best rep you can be? Imagine if you were playing at that A level consistently, every day, every month, every quarter. And imagine how much you would be making if you could do that. But can you do it on your own? Are you really putting aside time? Yeah, listening to a podcast is good. It is. And I appreciate it. But I bet you're doing something else while you listen to it. You're driving, you're sitting at the airport, you're on a plane, you're on the treadmill, you're out walking the dog. The problem is you're not actively listening. What you need is a dedicated, probably an hour a week to improving your game. First, defining the game that you're playing. Understand how people at the top level view that game and what they do differently and how they do it. It's not knowledge. There's enough books out there. You could study it all. I've heard a lot of people, I read 500 sales books, and they're not making their quota. So it's clearly not knowledge. It's not just hard work. I see a lot of people spinning their wheels, not accomplishing anything. So it's pretty much, how you're doing it. Are you really polishing it up every day? Do you even understand what's going to happen next? See, as human beings, we're conditioned to do the opposite of what works in sales. We're conditioned to be reactive, to only react when things go bad, not to prevent. That's counterintuitive. We're programmed to talk, not to listen, to think of the world through our eyes, not our clients'. This is what the course does for you. You get to hear other people and what they're up against. You get to learn how to get into any account in a systematic, scalable way that you can automate through technology and outsourcing. You get to see how you can control deals, how you can keep direction, momentum, and control over them. And you get to talk to somebody about your deals. You get some other eyes on it. Hear how other people would work that deal. And you get better. And if you can double your income, are you open to that? Or do you think you know it all? Trust me, I spent, when I did on-premise sales training, the only thing I really didn't like about it is there would always be that B player with his arms crossed in front of him, blaming his territory or the product or the competitor, and didn't make their number. But now you can make your number. Go to b2brevenue.com. Pick a time. Let's talk over what you're doing. Check out the courses. Check out the YouTube channel, Brian Burns Sales on YouTube. I've got 2 other podcasts, the Sales Questions That Sell, Sales Questions, Brutally Honest Answers. I keep coming up with the wrong name. And then the B2B Revenue Leadership Show, where I talk to sales leaders about sales topics and what they care about. And it's good to hear the manager's perspective. And, I agree with most of them, but, there's way too much focus today what people think is data, and it's just stuff that's crammed in. But that's a different topic. But check that out, B2B Revenue Leadership and the Sales Questions, Brutally Honest Answers. Follow me on LinkedIn. Check out the YouTube channel. And follow the podcast company page, The Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling Podcast. There we go. We'll see you next time.